Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Sip and Talk. So, you know how I'm always trying new things? Well, this week, I tried making my own kombucha.
Oh, no. Yeah.
How'd that go?
It was a total disaster. It turns out following those YouTube tutorials doesn't always guarantee success.
Yeah, I've definitely had my fair share of kitchen experiments gone wrong.
It's all fun and games until you've got a science project exploding in your fridge. But speaking of things bubbling over, you're not going to believe what we're diving into today. U.S.-Taiwan relations, and things are getting seriously heated.
Seriously heated is an understatement.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's set the stage for our listeners.
Yeah.
You know, those who might not be fully up to speed, you might be thinking, what's the big deal with U.S.-Taiwan relations? Well, it's a long and complicated history.
It really is.
But here's the short version.
Okay.
Taiwan and mainland China, they've got this whole one country, two systems thing going on.
Right.
But China still claims sovereignty over Taiwan. Mm-hmm. And the U.S. has always been kind of walking a tightrope.
Trying to support Taiwan without actually saying they'd go to war for them.
That strategic ambiguity thing.
Exactly. But hold on to your hats, folks, because things just got a whole lot more complicated.
Okay.
We've got a stack of sources here.
Okay.
And let me tell you, they suggest that things are about to change.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
Big changes.
What kind of sources are we talking?
We've got news articles, expert analyses, think tank reports, you name it. And the big news flash is this resolution that a bunch of U.S. representatives just proposed.
Oh, wow.
Get this.
Okay.
They want to ditch the whole Strategic Ambiguity Act and formally recognize Taiwan as a separate country.
Whoa, hold on. That's a huge departure from the U.S.'s long-standing policy.
Right.
I mean, didn't they always, tiptoe around this issue to avoid poking the bear?
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
This resolution doesn't just stop at recognizing Taiwan.
Oh, okay.
It calls for full diplomatic relations, ambassador swaps.
Oh, wow.
Even a U.S.-Taiwan free trade agreement.
They're not messing around.
They're going all in.
Wow.
But the million-dollar question is, why now? What's driving this sudden shift in U.S. policy?
Yeah.
And what does it mean for Taiwan, for the U.S., and for the rest of the world? That's what we're going to unpack today.
I am ready.
Okay, so
let's unpack this.
What are some of the possible explanations for this dramatic change in U.S. policy? It feels like it came out of left field.
It really does.
Some of our sources suggest that there's growing support for Taiwan in the U.S.,
okay,
especially among Republicans who see China as a major threat, economically and militarily.
Right.
They argue that supporting Taiwan is a way to push back against China's growing influence.
It's like a high-stakes poker game.
Yeah.
With Taiwan right in the middle of the pot.
Okay, but hold on. We can't forget about the elephant in the room.
Oh, you mean Trump?
Yeah, some of our sources suggest he might feel emboldened to take even bolder steps in support of Taiwan, maybe even recognizing its independence outright.
Wow, can you imagine the fireworks if that happens?
Oh, my God.
That would be crazy.
But what about the Democrats? Are they on board with this whole Taiwan love fest?
Good question.
Yeah, well, there's definitely some support for Taiwan within the Democratic Party. They're generally more cautious about provoking China.
Okay.
Some of them worry about the potential economic and military blowback.
Right.
From a major escalation in tensions.
Yeah.
You know, the kind that could lead to a global trade war, or even worse.
You're painting a pretty intense picture here.
Let's talk about China.
Okay.
They can't be too happy about all this, right?
I was just thinking that.
They see Taiwan as a breakaway province that must be reunified with the mainland, even if it means using force.
Right.
And this whole U.S. resolution thing, let's just say it's like waving a red flag in front of a bull.
Oh, boy.
I'm getting some serious, this is going to end badly vibes.
I know, me too. Welcome back to the deep dive. We left things with U.S.-Taiwan relations kind of teetering on the edge of chaos.
Chaos is putting it mildly. But before we spiral into a full-blown geopolitical meltdown, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
Because this isn't just some regional squabble. What happens with Taiwan could have serious consequences for the entire world.
Oh, absolutely. This is global domino effect waiting to happen. Think about it. Remember when that one cargo ship got stuck in the Suez Canal?
Oh, yeah.
And suddenly everyone was freaking out about supply chains? Well, a conflict in Taiwan could be like that, but on a much larger scale.
Okay, I'm already starting to feel a little panicky. But walk me through it. What are the global ripple effects we should be worried about?
Well, for starters, Taiwan is a tech powerhouse.
Okay.
They're the world's leading manufacturer of semiconductors.
What are those?
You know those tiny chips that power everything?
Oh, okay.
From smartphones and laptops to cars and even refrigerator.
Wait, my fridge has a brain. No wonder it's always judging my midnight snack choices.
Yeah, probably. But seriously, if there's any disruption in Taiwan,
Yeah.
those supply chains could go haywire. Think about it. No more new phones. No more laptops, maybe even delays in car production. Remember how crazy the used car market got during the pandemic?
Oh, yeah.
Well, imagine that, but for everything electronic.
Okay, that's a terrifying thought. I'm officially never complaining about delayed Amazon deliveries again.
Right.
But let's talk about the other players in this global drama. What about U.S. allies like Japan and Australia?
Right.
Would they be forced to pick sides if things got hot with China over Taiwan?
It's a tough spot for them. They have strong security ties with the U.S.,
Yeah.
but they also have their own interests to consider, especially when it comes to trade with China.
It's like they're caught between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
They can't afford to alienate either superpower.
Exactly.
So what's the most likely scenario here? Will they side with the U.S. or try to play it safe?
It's hard to say for sure. Some of our sources suggest that they might try to walk a tightrope, offering diplomatic support to the U.S. while trying to maintain economic ties with China. It's a risky strategy, but it might be the only way to avoid getting dragged into a conflict they don't want.
So basically they're going to try to be friends with everyone. That sounds complicated.
Very complicated. And it's not just about the U.S. and its allies. Think about all the countries that have close economic ties with China.
Yeah.
They're going to be under immense pressure to choose sides, too.
Oh, right. Like a lot of countries in Southeast Asia depend heavily on trade with China.
Exactly.
Would they be forced to cut ties with Taiwan if China demanded it?
It's a real possibility. And it wouldn't just be about economics. China could use its political and diplomatic clout to try to isolate Taiwan on the world stage, making it harder for them to participate in international organizations and to forge new partnerships.
Wow. It's like a global popularity contest where Taiwan is suddenly the unpopular kid. Okay, let's go back to those potential scenarios we talked about earlier. We've got diplomatic compromise, gradual escalation, and all-out war. Where do you think things are headed based on what we know so far?
Well, the truth is, it's impossible to predict the future with absolute certainty.
Yeah.
But if we look at the evidence and analyze the motivations of each player, we can at least make some educated guesses.
Okay, Professor X, fire up your crystal ball. What do you see?
I wish it were that easy. But seriously, I think the most likely scenario in the short term is a period of heightened tension and uncertainty.
Okay.
We're probably going to see a lot of posturing and saber rattling from both the U.S. and China as they try to assert their dominance and deter the other from making any rash moves.
So basically a lot of tough talk and military exercises, but no actual shooting. That's something, I guess. But where do we go from there? Does this tension eventually fizzle out, or could it escalate into something worse?
That's the big question, and it really depends on how each side responds to the other's actions. If they can find a way to manage their differences without resorting to aggression, maybe we can avoid a major conflict.
So you're saying there's hope for a peaceful resolution. Don't get my hopes up.
I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's definitely possible. Remember, both the U.S. and China have a lot to lose from a war, so there's a strong incentive for them to find a way to coexist peacefully.
Okay, I'm trying to be optimistic here. But let's be real, things could easily go south. What happens if this whole managing their differences thing doesn't work out?
That's where things get really tricky. If one side perceives the other as being too aggressive or too provocative, we could see a gradual escalation of tensions leading to a more dangerous and unpredictable situation. Think about it like a snowball rolling down a hill. It starts small, but it gathers momentum as it goes, and before you know it, you've got an avalanche on your hands.
Whoa, okay, that's a pretty vivid image. I'm definitely getting avalanche vibes from all this. But what would this gradual escalation actually look like in practice?
Well, we could see things like increased U.S. arms sales to Taiwan, more frequent and larger-scale military exercises in the region, and maybe even the establishment of a more formal U.S. military presence in the area.
Okay, that's definitely upping the ante. And how would China respond to all this?
They'd likely respond in kind with their own military buildup, increased patrols near Taiwan, and maybe even cyber attacks or economic sanctions against Taiwan or even the U.S.
So it's basically a tit-for-tat escalation, with each side trying to outdo the other. Doesn't sound like a recipe for stability.
You're right, it's a dangerous game, and there's always the risk of miscalculation or accident. A minor incident could easily spiral out of control, leading to a confrontation that nobody wants.
Yeah, this is getting intense. I'm starting to feel like we're living in one of those Cold War-era spy thrillers.
Yeah.
But, okay, let's say things do escalate and we end up on the brink of war. What would that actually look like? I mean, would it be all-out nuclear Armageddon or something less apocalyptic?
Well, let's hope it never comes to nuclear war. But even a conventional conflict between the U.S. and China would be devastating. We could see massive casualties, widespread destruction of infrastructure, and a global economic meltdown.
Okay, I think I need to lie down after that. But before we all succumb to existential dread, let's remember that there's still a chance things could go in a different direction.
You're right. It's important to remember that we're not doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. There's still time for diplomacy and cooperation to prevail. But it's going to take leadership vision and a willingness to compromise from all sides.
Well said. Okay, listener, take a deep breath. Maybe pour yourself a calming beverage. Things might not be as bleak as they seem.
Yep.
But just to cover all our bases, we need to talk about one more scenario, and it's a bit of a wild card.
Ooh, a wild card. I love a good plot twist. Lay it on me.
Imagine this. Instead of backing down or engaging in a tit-for-tat escalation, China goes all in on aggression. They ramp up the military pressure on Taiwan, crack down on any dissent at home, and become even more assertive on the global stage.
Okay, so they basically go full authoritarian, trying to intimidate anyone who stands in their way. Sounds a bit risky even for China.
It is risky, but here's where it gets interesting. This approach could actually backfire on them. By becoming more aggressive and authoritarian, China risks alienating potential allies, damaging its economy, and fueling internal unrest.
So they might think they're projecting strength, but they could actually be setting themselves up for a fall. That's fascinating.
Exactly. It's like a classic case of overplaying your hand. This aggressive approach could trigger a backlash from the international community, leading to increased sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and even military pushback. And within China, people might start to question their leaders and demand more freedom and accountability. It's like a pressure cooker. Crank up the heat too high and eventually it's going to explode.
Okay, I'm officially mind blown. So this wildcard scenario is basically a high-risk gamble for China. They could either end up consolidating their power or triggering their own downfall.
You got it. It's like one of those choose-your-own-adventure books where every decision has consequences and the ending is far from certain. But speaking of choices and consequences, we need to talk about what all this means for the people who are actually at the center of this drama, the people of Taiwan.
You're right. We can't forget about them. They're the ones whose lives are most directly impacted by all this geopolitical maneuvering. So let's dive into that next time in part 3 of our deep dive into the wild world of U.S.-Taiwan relations. Stay tuned.
Don't go anywhere, listener. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've talked about global chaos and economic meltdowns, and even a potential superpower showdown.
It's been a wild ride.
But before we wrap up, we need to shift our focus to the people at the heart of this whole drama, the people of Taiwan. What do all these potential scenarios mean for them?
It's a crucial point, you know. It's easy to get lost in the big picture geopolitics, but we can't forget about the people on the ground who will feel the real impact of these decisions.
Exactly. So let's put ourselves in their shoes. If you were living in Taiwan right now with all this uncertainty swirling around you, what would be your biggest concerns?
Well, I think the most immediate concern would be security.
Yeah.
You know, if China decides to ramp up the military pressure, it could create a real sense of fear and anxiety among the Taiwanese people.
Yeah.
Imagine living with the constant threat of military action, knowing that your home could become a battleground.
I can't even imagine.
It's a heavy burden to bear.
It's one thing to talk about war in the abstract, but it's a whole different story when it's happening in your own backyard.
Absolutely.
But security is just one piece of the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
What about the economic impact?
Oh, right. The economic consequences could be huge. Taiwan's economy is heavily reliant on trade.
Yeah.
And any disruption to those trade routes could have a ripple effect throughout society.
Like what?
We're talking potential job losses, price hikes, a general decline in living standards.
So it's like a double whammy. The threat of war and economic hardship.
It's a tough situation.
But, okay, let's not get too gloomy. Some of our sources suggest that Taiwan could actually benefit from all this international attention.
That's true. There's always a silver lining. As more countries become aware of China's aggressive behavior, they might be more willing to support Taiwan.
Yeah.
Diplomatically and economically.
So Taiwan could actually leverage this situation to strengthen its international standing. It's like that old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Exactly. And as the U.S. deepens its ties with Taiwan, it could open up new opportunities for trade, investment, cultural exchange.
So it's not all doom and gloom. There's a chance Taiwan could come out of this stronger and more independent.
Absolutely. And don't forget about the resilience of the Taiwanese people. They've faced challenges before, and they've always found a way to overcome them.
I'm feeling a bit more optimistic now, but I do have one last question. We talked about what the U.S., China, the rest of the world might do.
Right.
But what about Taiwan itself? What are their options in this high-stakes game?
That's the million-dollar question. Taiwan's leaders are in a tough spot. They need to find a way to navigate these turbulent waters without provoking China, while also asserting their own sovereignty.
It's a delicate balancing act. But what specific steps could they take?
Well, they could continue to strengthen their military defenses, diversify their economy, and build stronger relationships with the democratic countries around the world.
So basically, it's about playing the long game, preparing for any eventuality, while also building a more secure and prosperous future.
You got it. It's about being proactive, not reactive. It's about shaping their own destiny rather than being at the mercy of larger powers.
I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored the potential for global conflict, the economic implications, and the challenges facing the Taiwanese people.
Yeah.
But I think the most important takeaway is that this situation is complex and constantly evolving. There are no easy answers, and the future is uncertain.
I agree. But by understanding the complexities of this issue, by staying informed, and by engaging in thoughtful discussions like we've done today, we can at least start to grapple with the challenges ahead.
And who knows, maybe we can even find a way to create a more peaceful and just world in the process. All right, listeners, that's it for this week's deep dive into the world of U.S.-Taiwan relations.
We hope you enjoyed it.
And if you need a break from all this serious talk, remember to check out Mickytolife on YouTube.
For some good vibes.
Cheers to that. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.